There are also no canceled flights or delays reported so far. As I mentioned earlier, the passengers arriving now are mostly overseas workers or those heading abroad for other reasons. Back to you, Pia.
Paige, did authorities also inspect the NAIA, and what did they say?
Yes, Pia, there were two surprise inspections here at the NAIA Terminal 3 earlier today. First was Transport Chief Art Tugade. He went here earlier this morning and he identified several problems after making the rounds in the terminal. First, he hopes that airport authorities could add more personnel at the entry points and lessen the number of choke points that are causing the long lines. And just a few minutes ago, before we went live at the newscast, PNP Chief Leonardo Carlos also made the rounds in Terminal 3. He was checking the security situation here on Holy Wednesday. Airport authorities earlier said they are prepared for the major influx of passengers this Holy Week. Among the measures in place are tight security with guards going around and assistance desks attending to passenger concerns. Pia.
Paige Javier there reporting live from NAIA in Pasay City. Well, no operations for some railway lines beginning today to give way to their yearly maintenance activities. For MRT3 authorities, this week is also a time to hold training on crisis response. Our Caroline Bonkin reports.
The MRT3 management did a simulation of the train attack in Tokyo, Japan last October to check how they would respond to this kind of situation. A man pretended to stab passengers and started a fire on the train. The police, MMDA, Red Cross, Coast Guard, BFP, and the MRT Safety and Security Unit responded. They will assess how the simulation went to check what else needs improvement. But MRT OIC General Manager Michael Kapati says passengers also need to be alert. In case of emergency, they need to push the emergency button thrice to signal the driver that there's a problem inside the train. That's the black button near each exit. Passengers then have to wait for instructions from the driver.
Dapat aware yung ating mga pasahero na minsan kasi may nangyayari sa loob ng train na hindi alam ng driver lalo na malaki. Lumayo na kagad yung mga pasahero doon sa mismong sa senaryo para malibit yung at wag bataranta. Kasi baka mamaya yung paglayo mo, nagbungguan na kayo, may mga nadapa na, mas maraming nai-injure doon sa hindi sa sitwasyon kundi yung sa aftermath ng sitwasyon.
Kapati says the first line of defense are the scanners where contraband such as grenades, guns, and knives are confiscated before entry. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
LRT2 also halted operations today, and beginning tomorrow, the brakes are on for LRT1 and PNR for maintenance activities as well. Commuters can expect PNR operations to resume by Easter Sunday. Other train lines will follow on Monday, April 18th. Disaster response officials say 43 people died because of Agaton, 8 were injured, 7 remain missing. Most of the casualties are from a landslide in Baybay City in Leyte. NDRRMC spokesman Mark Timbal says the reported casualties are still being validated. More than 34,000 individuals had to evacuate. Over 21 million pesos worth of humanitarian aid has been provided to evacuees. The Weather Bureau, Pagadian, says some parts of the country will continue to experience moderate to heavy rains until tomorrow.
May mga areas din po na flooded pa rin. Kaya po iba yung pag-iingat po ang ating pinapaalala sa mga kababayan natin. Kayo po ay magpatuloy na sumunod at makipag-ugnayan sa ating mga local government units para sa mga gawaing pangkaligtasan.
Agaton, the first storm to wreak havoc in the country this year, weakened into a low-pressure area this morning, which eventually dissipated. Pag-asa says there will be scattered rain showers in Quezon, the Bicol region, Oriental Mindoro, Marinduque, Romblon, and the Visayas. Well, let's again check the situation in Baybay City in Leyte. Authorities there saying 62 people have died and scores are still missing, most of them residents of Barangay Cantagnos, ground zero of Agaton's onslaught this weekend. Our Rex Remita joins us live. Rex, what do you see?
Well, we reached Barangay Cantagnos here in Baybay City a while ago, just a few hundred meters away from where I am standing right now, and what we saw was utter devastation. It was once a community of hundreds of residents, but when we arrived, the silence was deafening. There was almost nobody in the place when we arrived except for a few people from nearby villages and some heavy equipment digging through mud that fell from the mountain, looking for any sign of life. Rescuers are racing against time. As the hours pass by, their chances of finding survivors are getting bleak.
Kahapon nagpalipad kami ng mga drone doon para malaman kung may mga tao pang, kung marinig nila yung drone, makakaway, makita kung meron pang naghihintay. So ngayon, ngayon lang kasi talaga tumigil yung ulan, kaya ngayon makakapasok yung mga responders natin, no, makita rin nila, lalo-lalo na doon sa mga perimeter, baka mapasok nila ngayon.
Baybay City Mayor Boying Cari says 90% of the barangay was flattened by the landslide which struck over the weekend. A probe into what may have led to the tragedy is underway.
Itong barangay Cantagnos kasi, although nasa tabi siya ng river, meron siyang malaking rice field sa likod. Malawak yung rice field nila, saka malayo pa yung bukid. Ang ano lang na 1 kilometer away yung pinanggalingan ng yung lupa na nahulog. Tapos meron siyang momentum na umabot talaga doon sa barangay. Fully saturated na yung lupa, kaya putik yung umabot sa kanila.
Survivors have already been evacuated. It's unclear if they will still be allowed to return to Barangay Cantagnos. Some of those who witnessed the disaster spoke to CNN Philippines.
Nung pirmerong putok na may mga nagkaanod ng mga kabinet sa ilog. Ngayon, nagpuntahan na ang mga tao para sumigun pangalawang beses pagputok. Mga mga lupa naman ang dami tsaka tubig. Kaya yung ibang tao na nadaganan na ng mga puno kasi lahat ng mga puno nangatumban na.
One of their urgent needs now is drinking water. The mayor says the city's water system broke during the floods and it will take weeks before water supply is fully restored. Some residents in the downtown have no choice but to line up for water rations.
Wala na kasi kaming magagamit para pangsaing, yung panghugas. Lang kami sa yung mga deep well, kaso ginagamit lang din namin yung panghugas lang.
Para sa bigo, yung pagluto namin, tsaka yung sa bahay, gamit sa bahay, panglinis.
Aside from water, evacuees also need food packs, clothing, blankets, and hygiene kits. Now, time is of the essence, and people here are also hoping that the weather will continue to improve. Back to you, Pia.
Stay safe over there. Rex Remito reporting live from Baybay City in Leyte. Well, still in Leyte, you're looking at footage showing the moment a landslide hit Barangay Pilar in the town of Abuyog, which is just an hour away from Baybay City. Authorities say they have recovered at least 7 bodies of landslide victims from Barangay Pilar and 2 other villages. 128 other people were injured. Now, over in Western Visayas, nearly the entire province of Capiz is still submerged in floodwaters. Governor Nonoy Contreras made an aerial inspection earlier today to assess the damage to infrastructure and agriculture from Agaton. Rescue operations are underway for stranded residents. Coming up on Newsnight, more reports of banking fraud. We look into one case where the victim allegedly lost almost 100,000 pesos. And in New York, a manhunt is underway after a mass shooting in a crowded subway train. Our consulate also has some advice for Filipinos in the state. Stay tuned to CNN Philippines.
RPN, DXKP Pagadian. Ang inyong Radyo Ronda RPN. RPN. Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines. Live to the world.
Exodo, Kabanata 18, versikulo 21. Ngunit pumili ka ng mga taong may kakayahan, may takot sa Diyos, mapagkakatiwalaan, at di masusuhulan. Gawin mo silang tagapangasiwa sa libo-libo, daan-daan, 5-50, at 10-10. Ang mabuting balita ay hatid sa inyo ng MX3.
Breaking news at this hour, the Food and Drug Administration has approved a second booster dose and frontline healthcare workers. The health department says the additional dose will be given at least 4 months after the first booster shot. Officials are now drafting guidelines for implementation. The latest data show more than 66 million Filipinos have been fully vaccinated, but only 12.4 million have been boosted. This is a developing story. We will bring you more information as soon as they become available. Agriculture Secretary William Dar tells CNN Philippines they have been investigating a, quote, good number of their officials over reports they are allegedly involved in smuggling. Dar says the comprehensive investigation has been going on since last year. He refused to disclose other details since those tagged have the right to due process.
Until we are through with our investigation and we are clear that may ginawang masama or collaboration sa mga smugglers, we will bring this to the open in due time. Wala pong powers to dismiss. I will also recommend this to the President kung dismissal. Depende dun sa gravity ng involvement.
In yesterday's hearing, Senate President Tito Soto named 4 alleged smugglers of agricultural products, adding that, according to whistleblower, DA and customs officials are protecting suspects. Dar says the names did not come up in their investigation, but confirmed that one of them, alleged onion queen Leah Cruz, is a known importer. Senator Cynthia Villar said Cruz was investigated before.
I just want to manifest na noong 2014, nasa listahan na namin yung si Leah Cruz. And blacklist na yan noong 2014 kasi I was chairman of agriculture since 2013. Lumabas na yan sa investigation namin. So parang wala pa lang nangyari na blacklist yan kasi hanggang ngayon lumalabas pa rin yung Leah Cruz about onion.
Sa mga planters din at importer, alam ko yun. Pero kung nang-investigan na previously, bakit hindi inahabla?
After his absence in the last 3 hearings and calls for him to resign, Dar apologized and said he serves at the pleasure of the president. He added the agency has so far confiscated 800 million pesos worth of smuggled vegetables from China. Well, last year, hundreds of Banco de Oro account owners fell victim to online banking fraud. Now, customers of another bank are complaining about losing thousands of pesos to scammers. Tristan Odalo reports.
20 minutes, that's how long it took for the savings of Leia, not her real name, to disappear from her bank account last March. The nightmare started after she received a call from an alleged bank employee.
Maingat pa ako noon tinanong ko ano yung account number ko, tinanong ko anong name, address. Alam nila mismo kung kailan ako nag-open ng bank. Kaya syempre, niwala ako. Parang alam na yung buong data ko eh.
When she felt that something was not right with the call, she immediately tried to stop the transaction.
Tumatawag na ako mismo sa security bank. Unfortunately, sobrang tagal bago nila sinagot yung tawag ko. Minimum yung 30 minutes.
Leia lost almost 100,000 pesos.
Pinagtrabahuhan ko yan for ilang years. Tapos, gagamitin ko siyang pang-tuition. Tapos, nawala lang din bigla.
She claims more people are coming out after falling prey to online scams.
Yung isang babae, manganganak siya, nawalan sila ng malaking amount din. Yung isa naman, may anak siyang may kidney disease. Meron kaming dalawa na ikakasal sana. Ipon nilang magnobia. Tapos nawala lang din lahat ng ipon nila.
Leia said that after a series of investigations, the bank refused to return her money.
Dapat secured kami sa pera na nakalagay sa bangko namin. Pero bakit alam ng ibang tao yung account numbers namin? Bakit alam nila kung kailan kami nagbabangko? Bakit alam nila yung home address?
In a statement sent to CNN, Philippine Security Bank said they thoroughly investigate reports of fraud. They said they have also listed down initiatives to protect customers, including releasing advisories in all of their platforms. The statement added that they have also invested in new technologies to boost their cybersecurity. The bank also said they are working with banking organizations to spread awareness about cybercrimes. More bank customers are falling to the same modus. Last December, close to 700 BDO bank account owners complained that they had been victims of online fraud. In 2021, the Bankers Association of the Philippines said an estimated 1 billion pesos were lost to online bank schemes. In 2020, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas reported that 13% of 20,000 consumer complaints were due to unauthorized and fraudulent transactions. Tristan Udalo, CNN Philippines.
The BSP says it will look into the refund process and the possible data breach in banks. It also advises customers to be more vigilant. An official at the Commission on Elections denies there is infighting as fellow commissioners take opposing sides on granting exemptions to the election gun ban. Commissioner George Garcia also says Socorro Inting stays as the chairperson of the gun ban committee despite her resignation as the poll body defers consideration on her irrevocable move. On Tuesday, Inting stepped down as panel head to protest the en banc's vote, allowing Chairman Saidamen Pangarungan to exempt certain cases from the gun ban and to place an area under COMELEC control. In solidarity, two commissioners who voted against Pangarungan's special powers, Amy Ferolino and Marlon Casquejo, wore black in today's en banc meeting.
Wala pong mga kuro-kuro na infighting, may na-divided na ang commission, hindi po totoo yun. We deferred consideration of the resignation of Commissioner Inting out of respect sa kanya. Walang sinasabi nila, yung mga may discussion, I can honestly tell you with God as my witness, walang vehement objection, reactions, or whatever. Napaka-solemn ng aming discussion doon at naging maayos yung aming talakayan patungkol sa issue na yon.
The other COMELEC officials who voted in favor of the chairman's special powers include Pangarungan himself, as well as new commissioners George Garcia, Amy Neri, and Ray Bulay. On to the presidential candidates. 60 retired officials of the Philippine National Police and its forerunner, the Philippine Constabulary, have expressed strong support for Vice President Leni Robredo's candidacy. They said Robredo's peace and order advocacy resonates with them, including her approach to continuing the drug war, which is through education and rehabilitation. The retired police officers also holding on to Robredo's commitment to strengthen the criminal justice system and to beef up the police force. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno refusing to back out of the presidential race to give way to Robredo. Moreno dismissed calls from former supporters to make the, quote, supreme sacrifice and dared unnamed rivals to do it instead.
Ang pinakamaganda, siguro, yung hindi na nag-go-grow na kandidato dahil they're talking to their own echo chamber should also do the same. Supreme sacrifice. But my supreme sacrifice is here today. This is the sacrifice. Despite of misimpression, misperception, or perception or impression that the other side of the river is doing and creating in your eyes in your mind, this is the sacrifice. I'm going to sacrifice myself to address yung problema ng taong bayan.
Senator Manny Pacquiao downplayed the One Cebu party's endorsement of former Senator Bongbong Marcos. Pacquiao said he is confident of getting the support of Visayans because he speaks their language.
Hindi ko makuha yung suporta ng mga halos incumbent ng mga Bisaya, yung mga nakaupo, kahit sa buong Pilipinas. Pero ang suporta ng majority ng suporta ng mga mahihirap nasa akin.
Labor leader Caliodi de Guzman calling on the Education Department to bring back history classes to the curriculum after Pinoy Big Brother housemates called the Gomburza Brothers Majoha. The labor leader, or the Gomburza priests. The labor leader says the seemingly small error reflects how vulnerable the youth is to historical revisionism and fake news. In 2014, DepEd removed Philippine history from the grades 7 and 8 curriculum and replaced it with Asian studies. 3 more candidates will join the 11th CNN Philippine Senatorial Forum. Watch them side by side as they bear their platforms and stand on issues. That's on Sunday, April 17 at 7 in the evening with senior correspondent and anchor Ruth Cabal only here on CNN Philippines. News overseas now. The Philippine Consulate General reminds Filipinos in New York to take extreme caution as the search for the suspect in the subway shooting incident in Brooklyn continues. New York police have identified one person of interest, Wisconsin resident Frank James. These are pictures of his last known address in Milwaukee. James' ties to New York are unclear. The suspect still at large opened fire at the 36th Street subway station on Tuesday, hitting at drops. A new trailer for Stranger Things Season 4 will give you a peek after the break.
Kung kinaya ni Heidelin, kaya niyo rin.
RPN DXKP Pagadian, ang inyong Radyo Ronda. RPN Radio Philippines Network. Radio Philippines Network. Live to the world, pinaagi sa FB page, karon mag-download na. Pinaagi sa Google Play o Apple Store, YouTube o Twitter. Alang sa mas ipakuskan ng mga balita, komentaryo, kasayuran o kalingawan. Ang mas ipakuskan ng inyong Radyo Ronda.
Member, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Welcome back. A thrilling Game 4 of the PBA Finals is underway with the Meralco Bolts fighting to earn their third win against Barangay Ginebra. So far, the teams are tied at 19 points.
And you have to make this hard shot.
Oh, okay. Let's correct that now. It's 19-21. Ginebra, 21 points in the lead in the first quarter. If the Bolts win, though, they only need one more victory to bag the Governor's Cup title, which would be their first PBA title. But Ginebra's already captured wins of its own, with Scotty Thompson nabbing Best Player of the Conference and Justin Brownlee being named Best Import. Stay tuned to our social media platforms for more updates. On the small screen, a lot more has been revealed about Season 4 of Netflix sci-fi hit Stranger Things. In the newly released trailer, we catch Site 11 supposedly losing her powers and a mysterious villain from the Upside Down. Take a look.
It's time. Have lost.
Stranger Things 4 comes out in two parts. Volume 1 premieres May 27th. Volume 2 is out on July 1st. And that is it for now. Before we go, we'd like to thank our viewers. CNN Philippines once again named the most trusted media outlet in Publicus Asia's latest survey. Stay safe, have a blessed Holy Week, and see you on Monday. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
Pets are a valuable part of our lives, but sometimes they might get too excited or too aggressive and end up scratching or biting someone. This can put people at risk of developing rabies, a virus that is usually transmitted by the bite of an infected animal. It's increasingly common here in the country today. But the good news is it can be prevented with just a few precautions. On the program today, we'll talk more about the disease, the different animals that can carry it, and what you need to do if bitten by one. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and you're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. A bite by a rabid animal can be highly fatal, but it's easily preventable. Our guests are here today to tell us how we can best protect ourselves from rabies in a country where it's extremely rampant. With us today is Dr. Jennifer Manzano. She's an adult neurologist from the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Also with us is Dr. Camille Macalalag Santa Cruz, who is an emergency medicine specialist from the Rizal Medical Center in Pasig City and the Asian Hospital and Medical Center. Now, we have one of the highest prevalence of rabies in the entire world. The Philippines actually records over 200 deaths every year because of it. But outside of Asia and Africa, this disease is considered rare. Dr. Jen, I'll start the discussion with you. Why is it so rampant and widespread here in the Philippines?
We have a lot of animals that are strays. We are an agricultural country, and so we are very exposed to wildlife. After all, rabies is seen in animals and get transmitted to humans. So I think these are the reasons why it is more rampant in the Philippines compared to other parts of the world.
Now, the first step we need to take in order to take control of this rabies situation is better awareness of the disease. Dr. Camille, tell us what exactly is the rabies virus and, of course, especially how is it transmitted? Which animals transmits this?
Rabies virus or rabies is a fatal but preventable disease. It is caused by a virus and may dalawang ways not to get infected. Either you are bitten by a rabid animal or you are non-bite naman yung exposure. Like you get scratched or you get an abrasion from exposure or playing with your pet or you have an open wound that's been licked by an infected animal. So those are the ways by which you get infected. What animals are usually infected by rabies? Usually, they're seen lang sa mammals. Ang mammals, they are warm-blooded animals, no, that have fur. So anything from dogs, cats, domesticated and non-domesticated, like big animals or large animals like cattle, horses. Some pigs have been documented also to get infected, no? In the wild, pwedeng magkaroon ng rabies ang mga bats.
You said that it can be transmitted through a scratch. Can you define what a scratch is? A lot of our viewers sometimes are very worried na kalmot sila ng pusa or ng aso. Walang dugo, but should they still go and have the rabies vaccine just to be safe?
Pag sinabi pong scratch or kalmot, no, it is basically caused by a sharp portion of the or a body part of the animal, no. Pwede kang ma-scratch by yung claws or yung paws ng animal na ng alaga mo, no, yung kuko, or pwede ring ngipin ang ginamit pero hindi siya bumaon, no? Ibig sabihin mababaw lang siya. Pero so mga mabababaw na sugat, no, or scratches or abrasions, pwedeng hindi mag-bleed. Pero we get a lot of patients at the ER pagdating sa amin, Doktora, pinadugo ko na po yan. So, alam mo yung piniga ng piniga hanggang sa hindi na nga nagdudugo, dumugo pa lalo. So, ibig sabihin na punit, nagkaroon ng tear dun sa where the scratch should have been, no? So, that actually makes it even worse. So, yan yung isang practice na ayaw sana natin gawin. Minsan may mga alaga tayo maharot. They're very playful, no? And you cannot control them. I mean, it's by nature, no? They use their claws or their paws. And if you get a scratch, agad-agad, no? Wash with running water. Use soap. No? Ang goal mo kasi is somehow ma-minimize yung risk mo of getting the virus, no? And saan ba nakikita yung virus? It is found usually excreted in the saliva of an infected animal. Ang aso, ang pusa, they lick themselves, no? When cats, they groom themselves, they use their tongue and lick their paws, the rest of the fur, etc., no? And for dogs naman, you know how dogs are, they drool and then, no? So, yung mga infected na substances or fluids from these animals can actually be, you know, that's where the virus can be found. So if you get that on your skin, on an open wound, then you get infected. You have a risk of getting the virus.
Now, Dr. Jen, what are some of the early warning signs of this disease? Of course, ayaw nating umabot doon, but how long does it take for these symptoms of rabies to start appearing?
The symptoms are usually due to hyperactivity of the nervous system. So, pwedeng nahihirapan silang lumunok. So, there's a lot of, minsan may drooling, nahihirapan mag-drink ng water. Ayaw nila sa tubig. Not because takot sa tubig, but because they have difficulty swallowing water. They may have jitteriness or nanginginig sila. And then they can have behavioral changes. So these are the signs and symptoms of rabies, primarily because the nervous system is affected. Pero initially, the earliest signs, pwedeng mag-manifest siya as like any viral illness. So parang flu lang siya.
Kapag umabot dito sa neurological symptoms, nagagamot pa ba ang rabies kapag umabot dito?
When it has reached the brain, it will have a 100% case fatality rate. This means that mamamatay talaga kapag ang isang tao kapag merong simptomas ng rabies. So talagang kinakailangan, one has to go to the hospital for post-exposure prophylaxis. Ang ibig sabihin, kailangan mabigay yung medicine that can neutralize the virus and be given the vaccination that will actively work against the virus. The recommendation is that the sooner that you get the immunization against rabies, and that means the passive and the active immunization, the better.
Once you have neurological symptoms, if these symptoms appear, there is no effective treatment, unfortunately. This is why preventing these symptoms to reach that point is the best cure. More on this when we return. You're watching Med Talk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. The number of rabies cases increases every year. It's a virus that affects the nervous system and is very fatal. But preventing the disease is somewhat easy. Today, we'll talk about what you need to do to protect yourself from rabies. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez. Welcome back to Med Talk Health Talk. We've established that people usually contract rabies through a bite of a rabid animal, an animal that is infected with rabies. We can also get it through scratches, abrasions, or even open wounds that were exposed to the animal's saliva. Dr. Jen, what if I was bitten by a rabid animal but there are no wounds? Should I still have myself checked?
From the outset, you don't know if the animal is rabid or not. An animal who is exhibiting behavioral changes most likely is rabid. An animal who is not exhibiting behavioral changes might also still have the virus but hindi pa nasa brain yung virus. So whether rabid or not, you should get yourself checked. And you should get the vaccination. It is also recommended to observe the animal for about 10 days if there will be any behavioral changes. So usually, kung walang behavioral change yung animal, when it bites you, pwede kasing nagre-replicate pa lang yung virus inside the animal and it has not yet reached the brain. Pero nasa saliva na ng animal. So you wait for about 10 days because it takes about 10 days for the virus to reach the animal's brain. So usually by the 10th day, mamamatay sila.
Dr. Camille, another common question is, how about if I was scratched by an animal infected with rabies but it did not break my skin? Walang dugong lumabas.
So if the advice is meron kang exposure, regardless, wala kang nakitang sugat, punta ka pa rin sa ospital. What more kung meron kang scratch, no? These are obvious, breaks in the skin. When you say scratch, may hapde, no? And even if wala tayong makita, no, hindi nag-bleed, no? So it's not that deep enough, but still, because you may be exposed, then it's best to go to the hospital na lang for prevention. For animals kasi, they're not born with rabies. So it's also a disease for them. They either interact with a rabid animal. It doesn't have to be, cat interacting with another cat. It can be being one room with a bat, no, that can be potentially a carrier for rabies. It's best really to be responsible pet owners if you decide to own a cat or a dog, no, to either keep them indoors. If you don't have the luxury naman of keeping them indoors, then make sure that they're not exposed to other animals that, might be exposed also to other animals who are infected with rabies.
Okay.
And ang rabies vaccine for animals are given yearly. Para po siyang flu vaccine natin, no? I think sa Pilipinas, it's around 250 pesos per shot. But sa barangay po, libre po yan, no? Just contact your LGU. They can provide a schedule. If you have a lot of pets at home and you can't possibly bring all the pets to the barangay hall, then maybe you can request for a personnel from the barangay to come and, give your pets a shot.
Now, Dr. Jen, I'd like to go with the next procedure of someone who is bitten at pumunta na sa hospital. What should be done next?
Kailangan mabigyan siya ng post-exposure prophylaxis. And this is there are two kinds, no? One is the immune globulin. The purpose of immune globulin is to provide passive immunization. So it's 4-dose vaccine given over 2 weeks. This will neutralize the virus para hindi siya magre-replicate at hindi dadami yung virus, no? At hindi naaakyat papunta sa nervous system.
Now, Dr. Camille, is the passive and active forms of immunity given at the same time?
So it depends on your exposure category. We categorize yung type ng sugat mo from your exposure para malaman natin kung anong klaseng vaccines ang pwedeng ibigay sa'yo, no? Or yung immediately kailangan mo. So, category 1 is licks on closed skin, no? Na dilaan ka ng alaga mo, ganyan. Usually, pagka ganon, hindi kailangan ng bakuna. We encourage lang, i-wash mo buti, maligo ka, no? Hugasan mo yung parte na nadilaan, ganyan. If, however, dinilaan ka sa muka, and then pumasok yung laway ng pet mo sa bibig mo, then we recommend that you go for a rabies shot. Pag naman sinabing category 2, meron pong break sa skin. Meron kang galos, meron kang scratch, no? Na pwedeng pamasukan ng virus. So pagka ganun po, nire-recommend namin yung rabies vaccine. pasok sa category 3. Ito po yung talagang nilapakan ng animal, no? Meron kang big laceration from the dog bite. Talagang sugat, nagdudugo. Automatic category 3 po yun. Other wounds or other exposures na category 3, kahit scratch po pero nasa neck and up, ibig sabihin napakalapit sa utak natin, no? Napakabilis ng pwedeng travel ng virus to the brain, then that's considered category 3. Or sa mga areas na highly innervated, ibig sabihin madaming nerves kasi tandaan po natin, ang goal ng virus na rabies ay makarating sa utak, no? So, pwedeng ang channel nila ay yung mga nerves natin. So, pag nakagat ka sa kamay, ayun, highly vascularized yung area na yan, sa kilikili, or yun nga, from neck up, category 3 yan automatically. Any lick, wala kang sugat, pero pumasok yung laway ng aso sa bibig mo, then category 3 yan. So, pagka ganon, kailangan dalawang klase ang ibibigay sa'yo. Yung rabies vaccine, which will give you active immune response, and yung H-rig or E-rig, depende kung anong meron dun sa emergency room ninyo, no? Or dun sa animal bite center.
Now, seeking medical attention after being bitten or scratched by a rabid animal can prevent rabies. But there are also several precautions you can take to protect your pets from infection. More on this when we return. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. Rabies is a primary health concern in our country, but together we can work towards eradicating it and keep ourselves and our furry friends safe and happy. Let's discuss how we can do that. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, your partner in healthcare. There are several things that you can do to protect your pet from rabies. Dr. Jen, can you walk us through some of them? How can our viewers be more protected with their pets?
The important thing in preventing rabies among dogs is to vaccinate them. Dogs who get exposed to other dogs and other wildlife are more prone. So yung mga stray dogs, yung mga aso at pusa na nasa kalye, mas maganda kung ang community merong program talaga para sa vaccination. Nabanggit ni Dr. Camille kanina, marami ng projects naman sa LGU to vaccinate at the barangay level. So please bring not only your pets, but I hope your entire community will also make it a program na kahit yung mga strays, no, sa community will get vaccinated. It's also important to limit the interaction of our pets and of animals, not with other animals who might also carry the virus. Kasi maraming strains ang virus. So, merong canine strain, merong feline strain, yung strain para sa cats. No? Sometimes, pwedeng mag-cross siya. No? So, pwedeng yung dog ko magkaroon ng, pag na-expose sa cats, pwedeng magkaroon ng rabies virus na galing sa cats. So, kahit na may vaccine siya, pwedeng may dinadala din siyang virus. So, you have to limit that also. Sana hindi natin palabasin yung mga pets natin nang walang appropriate supervision. So, leash your pets when you're walking them.
Dr. Jen, you mentioned na marami palang strains ang rabies. Meron one specific for dogs and cats. Are all of these fatal? And are all of these strains addressed also by the treatments, the vaccines, and the immunoglobulin?
Fortunately, they are. Even bats, meron. Nabanggit ni Dr. Camille kanina. And outside the Philippines, I think in the West, yung bats talaga yung primary means of transmitting virus to men. Hindi ka sa dogs. Kasi maganda ang vaccination rate nila among dogs.
Now, Dr. Camille, one of the best ways to prevent rabies is to limit your exposure to this. But unfortunately, a lot of people who are working around animals, dog trainers, or probably pet stores for that matter, or people who are exposed to different animals most of their time, what kind of protection can we give for them?
Kailangan naka-protective equipment din sila like gloves, yung simple protection na ganyan. Goggles, when they, kasi you never know, no, pag dogs, they start barking, yung spit, no, can end up in their faces, ganyan. So, of course, mask, just to limit the exposure. So, yun yung mga para sa ating animal health workers, no, who deal with these animals or potentially rabid. Also, just a note, no, for people, kasi nauso yung glamping or camping, ganyan. If you see a wild animal that appears to be tame, no, suspect mo na medyo, kasi they're not supposed to be behaving that way. Usually, animals in the wild, they tend to, shun away from people, especially kung maingay, kung ano. But if you see an animal there na parang might be sick. So just stay away from strays, stay away from, wild animals like that. So yon, just to prevent your exposure.
Dr. Jen, are there any red flags on the behaviors of animal that may prompt someone to maybe think that this animal might be infected with rabies?
The virus attacks the nervous system, so you have to observe the animal very closely. The symptoms or the signs are actually quite similar to the signs and symptoms in men. So, excessive salivation, yung talagang naglalaway sila. Sometimes they have this very, among dogs, no, yung very high-pitched na yell or barking kasi nga their throat muscles can be weak or paralyzed. So, the way they bark sounds quite different. Sometimes they tend to be very aggressive because they display behavioral changes. So yung behavioral changes can be something like mukha silang tame when they should be wild, or sometimes they become really aggressive and they become and they attack you without any reason.
Always remember to practice responsible pet ownership to keep your pets and those around you safe and well. Thank you very much, neurologist Dr. Jennifer Manzano and emergency medicine specialist Dr. Camille Macalalag Santa Cruz for being with us today and sharing your knowledge, especially when it comes to rabies. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. We'll see you again next time.